this is territory or land that it was home to the Jews since the time of Moses, and the freeing of the slaves from the pharaohs of Egypt and walking through the Sinai, and references are there to his movement in the Old Testament, which is the Torah, and even in the Quran. Plus, it is a recognized fact that the residents of that area historically were the Jewish people, not as a people who follow Judaism. I'm not talking of religion. I'm simply talking of a people. For example, the Persians are a people, or the Arabs are a people, or the Indians are a people. That is how the Jews are a people who lived in this area, but were, as monotheists, were a thorn in the side of the Romans, or even the Persians, who at different times invaded the territory and destroyed the temples, and they got scattered around the globe to the extent that some of them sought refuge in southern India as well, where near Cochin there is still a synagogue to their name. They elsewhere in Mumbai or in Karachi or even in Peshawar, which is northwest area, they were known as, no, the Mumbai Karachi people are known as the Bani Israel. And then there were Jews even living in the northwestern territories of India, in Peshawar, which is now in Pakistan, who were driven there after the Russian Revolution or during the Second World War. So they were scattered around the world, but there has always been a Jewish population in that area. Now, as far as historically is concerned, this is their territory, just as the territory of Persia is for Persians, or Arabia is for the Arabs. However, in the year 636, I'm trying to cut it short, that's the first time that the Arabs invade this place. And our Muslims are quite proud of the fact that the second caliph, that is Umar, or Hazrat Umar as we say, led an army and occupied those territories, and on top of the Jewish temple built a ramshackle mosque, a wooden structure that would later be referred to as Masjid al-Aqsa, because there are references of what Muslims believe is the flight of Prophet Muhammad to the skies, and they say the steed or the horse on which he was stopped over in Masjid al-Aqsa. But the masjid that they call Masjid al-Aqsa was built much later. So it's a convenient connecting of facts to make that place holy for Muslims as well. For Jews, it is their homeland. For Christians, it is the place where Jesus was born and walked, and Jesus himself was a Jew and persecuted by the Romans. And that is where the Old Testament and the New Testament come in. But the historical claim by Arabs that this is our territory, which foreign Jews came to settle in, needs to be taken with a bit of salt. It is a fact that those who are today known as Palestinians, and at that time were Arabs of that area. The word Palestine was in the 20s and 30s associated with how Jews around the world used to refer to this place. Palestine, the letter P does not even have an occurrence in the Arabic language. Palestine is the word that was used, but it came into usage much later. At the time when India was partitioned, British India was partitioned, there's a place called British Palestine, which was carved out of the Turkish Caliphate, during which time the Turks colonized the Arabs, and at that time they were, as Muslim Khalifas, were in charge of Jerusalem, but never shifted their capital over there, never recognized it as such. And if you go back even to the times of the Prophet, he, in fact, in the middle of a prayer, turned his back on Jerusalem and said that the Muslim holy place is Mecca. And he turned, prior to that, he would lead the Muslims in prayer towards Jerusalem. And that ended that period. Now, those are the historical facts that cannot be denied, which many Muslims do deny. But even if both sides are true, the fact is that Israel as a state and Arabs as a people, or the PLO as an organization, have an agreement signed in Oslo under which both sides agreed to a two-state solution in the territories that were lost by Jordan to Israel during the 1967 war. Prior to that, all this area had no Jewish settlements. There was no residents. There was, no counterclaim, and there could have been a Palestinian state if the Jordanians or the Egyptians wanted Gaza and the West Bank to be one. It didn't happen, and once Egyptians recognized Israel with establishing diplomatic relations, the whole concept of a conflict between the Arab world and Israel, in my opinion, came to an end. The main protagonists in this war were the Egyptian army, primarily the main force of the Arab world, versus Israel. And the 67 war, in 48, about 10 armies from the Arab world attacked Israel because the United Nations divided British Palestine, which had already been divided by giving Jordan as a separate country because they needed a place for the kings of Mecca because they had no land. The Saudis had taken over that place. This might all sound very confusing to you or your listeners, but Transjordan was a country drawn out on a piece of paper. Jordan is just a river, it's not a country. Similarly, Lebanon was not a country. It was carved out of Syria, or Bilad Sham, as the name of that country is. And these were drawn out on a piece of paper between the foreign ministers of Britain and France and after the First World War, and designated as independent countries. So Palestine, Greater Palestine or British Palestine had already been divided, with one part being called Jordan, which even today has 90% of its population is Palestinian. But after the 67 war, the Egyptians sought peace with Israel, as did the Jordanians. And the war on those two fronts finished. There has never been a clash between these two. And just to put a context to your listeners, the biggest massacre of Palestinians has never been done by Israel, but it has been done by a gentleman called Brigadier Ziaul Haq, who then happened to be later Pakistan's ruler, who hanged Prime Minister Bhutto, and then became the introduced the whole notion of the Islamic State within the whole world. So the main killing ever that has happened by the Jordanian army, led by a Pakistani general and a Pakistan Air Force, killing 20,000 Palestinian, what called freedom fighters. So when people become sanctimonious about, oh, our solidarity is with the Palestinians, the Pakistanis should be the last people who should talk about it. India has always had historically good relations with the Arab world and has stood by the Arab world, but they've never really cut off their relationships with Israel. there is an Indian population, the Bani Israel, who live in cities. It's a tiny country. If you go there, you can go from one end of the border to the sea in probably half an hour. It's not, from an Indian context, it is not even Noida. It's very tiny. So that's the background, and the Palestinians today have a right to a state of their own, not because of any historical wrongdoing that has happened. And if it has happened, it has happened because the Arabs lost the wars, attacked a new state. If they had followed the 1948 partition, Palestine, or the Arab areas of British Palestine, would have been a thriving state, with their own port. Jerusalem would have been a UN governed territory with no occupation by anyone. But they refused, and they attacked Israel. As Israel, on its part, accepted the partition, but were attacked. And so subsequently, Israel became much larger than the UN had sanctioned it to be. Now, we can't first condemn the UN declaration division and then claim that we want it exactly the way it was. I'll take it if I win and I'll take it if I lose, does not apply in the real politics of the world. So today, the answer would be the creation of a Palestinian state on the West Bank. I would say even a three-state solution, because Gaza is a completely different culture that has evolved out of the massive killing by Hamas of the Palestinian administration's officials over there. So today, the government of the Palestinians is based in Ramallah under Abu Mazen, who was elected for 5 years and is now in his 15th year in power. And all their representatives after the election were killed by Hamas, not by Israelis. So these three entities, my understanding is that Gaza has reason to be an independent state on its own. And West Bank can certainly be in the territories that are controlled by the Israelis. I really believe that the settlements should not be built anymore. And where they've constructed the wall, they should declare the border and finish the conflict. You can't keep on fighting and losing a war, getting your own people killed, and then use that method as the basis of a future action. Your leadership must be pretty rotten to think that, oh, this is the way that we will get freedom, by killing our own people or getting our people killed. It's not going to happen. The Israelis have no place to go. The Arabs have, 22 countries. One would argue there should be one Arab country. You can't have tiny little spots here and there with 500,000 people fighting to their death in Yemen, and then talk about that the Israelis are the enemy. You are your own enemy when you kill your own people. In Syria, 500,000 people have died where Muslims have been fighting each other. Muslim Arabs have been killing Muslim Arabs. So no one from outside is going to come to help you cure from your madness if you say this madness is a sign of our intellect. So to sum it up, that's not necessarily or entirely exactly how one could table it, but for your listeners, this would be a fair idea. Now, what I'm saying would be rejected outrightly by perhaps not the Arabs, but the Muslims in India and the Muslims in Pakistan, who have their own constructs because they deny their own identity. You see, they live in the Indian subcontinent, which is Hindustan, but they deny that fact that they're Hindustanis by adhering to the culture or the naming conventions that come from overseas. Ashok naam ka to nahi, मुसलमान मिलता है ना, तो उसी तरह पड़े हुए हैं सबके सब. So there is an identity crisis within the subcontinent, Indian subcontinent Muslims, as to who they are. And when they look at Palestine, they find everything as a part of their own victimhood, but they can't see that victimhood when they look at China, which has put a million Muslims in concentration camps. Or they do not look at Muslims in Bangladesh when Pakistan killed 3 million in 71, or what the Pakistanis are doing in Balochistan today. So for them, when a Muslim kills a fellow Muslim, that's okay. You know, they, in their mind, when they killed the grandson of the Prophet, well, so what? They're even fighting over that in Yemen today. But other people, based on any set of rules, dare not criticize the idiotic nature of our struggle or say that you're doing something seriously wrong. You need to come to some understanding that this is the 21st century, not the 12th. And we just claim that, well, it's a question of shifting digits. You have 2, 1, and we have 1, 2. And since 1 and 2 are in series, therefore we must be right. I don't want to be dismissive, but we are in bad shape as a community, as a Muslim community. Whereas I'm talking the subcontinent Muslims, whereas if you go to Indonesia, if you go to Turkey, they have their own interests first. They are first Turks or Persians or Javanese or Mindanaoans or, Albanians or Chechens. But when we come to this part, where despite 1,000 years of plundering and ruling, the majority population is still Hindu. So that hasn't yet gone over well in the psyche of those who believe that our duty is to make the entire world come under Islamic rule.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.